Alright, welcome to the beginning tutorial of After Effects featuring Tomato Boy. I've created a character named Tomato Boy to help assist so that you can learn After Effects. Before we introduce you to Tomato Boy, we're going to go to Composition. I'm going to get a new composition up. You can have multiple compositions open in one project. So this one I'm going to call Tomato Boy. Tomato Boy. There we go. And you want it to be in PAL DV1 widescreen. PAL DV1 is our region code in the Asian Pacific. Here in Australia, we use PAL DV1. America uses NTSC. And square pixels is really important so that when you move things around or warp them or scale them, the proportion of each object stays the correct proportion. So see all the options. This is the one you want right there. PAL DV1 widescreen square pixel, then press OK. Down here is your duration. It's set for 1 minute 30 right now. You can just go in and change it. 1 minute 30 is perfect, and I'm going to say OK. And I am going to go and bring in some things into my composition. So here is your stage. That's where things you bring into your composition will appear and show you a preview of what your composition is going to look like. Down here is your timeline, and this is the playhead. You can zoom in and out from seconds to frames by sliding this little guy here. And when you bring things from your project library down here, that's when they'll appear in your project. So we've started a new composition. Now let's go and get some elements. Before I get those elements, I'm just going to turn on Title Safe, Action Safe, which is down here. And what that does is it gives me the border and shows me where everything in the video will be. So anything that's outside of this outside box is not going to appear in the video. In here is called Title Safe, and that's where you should try and keep any credits or any writing. It's just good practice. So here we go. I'm going to bring in a background. File, Import, and bring in a single file for now. I'm going to bring in the garden. And you can see my garden has appeared up here in my project window, and you can see I've also got it there. I'm going to bring in my garden. You can drop it on the stage or bring it down here. I'm going to drop it on the stage for now, and as you can see, it's quite big. There are lots of things that you can adjust and keyframe in After Effects. One of them is the scale. So if I select my garden layer down here in my Tomato Boy composition window, I hit S for scale, and then I can just hover over these numbers and shift left or right to move it proportionately. If I want to unlock the proportions so that I can change the height and without changing the width, I just click on that and I can stretch it out a bit either direction. And I like that one. Actually, I'm going to scale it down a little bit more. So I'm going to turn that back on so it keeps its proportion. Move that in, move that down, and I'm happy with that there. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to push on that little lock. That way I can't move that layer, because that's my background. You're not really going to want it to move, and it's quite easy to accidentally move later on. So I'm going to go and grab Tomato Boy. Tomato Boy is another one of my assets. Assets are your graphics that you're using in a composition. All of your graphics for one project should be kept in a single file that you call My Assets, or name your animation the Tomato Boy project, or somewhere where you're going to be able to get those files. Because later, when you're searching for files, or if you swap your computer, it's not going to be able to locate all those files when it comes to rendering, which is how you export your movie. So right now I'm going to go File, Import, File, navigate to Tomato Boy, Open, and you can see up there that he appears in the preview as a black background around him, and that means he has no background. And that means he has what's called a transparency or an alpha channel in his file. This is a PNG, or portable network graphic, which has no background. So I'm going to grab that, drop him in, and you can see he's got no background now. And if I push S for scale, I can get Tomato Boy down to a reasonable size. There he is. You can just grab him to change his position. And another very important thing that you want to alter is his anchor point. Before you put in any keyframes, which I'll tell you about in a minute, you want to move the anchor point. So if I push A, you can see that it looks like I'm moving Tomato Boy, but really I'm moving his anchor, and I'll show you that in a second. The anchor is that little crosshair in the middle of him. I'm going to move it to his hand, and then I'm going to push R for rotation to show you how it works. So if I rotate him now, he's anchored, or the center of gravity is around his hand. So if I change back to having the anchor point in the middle of his body, A, and I'm going to move him back to his anchor point, or move the anchor point back on him. And so now if I change his position, P, or rotate him, he'll rotate from that position. So R to rotate, and now you can see he's rotating from his anchor point. So it's always important to move the anchor point as soon as you get the object into a place where you're happy. Otherwise you put in a whole bunch of other commands and you go to change the anchor point and it will throw everything out. So anchor point first. So I want him to walk across my garden scene. So I get Tomato Boy off the stage. Right now I'm seeing his little tomatoey mitt just sticking out from frame there. That actually won't render in my final render because it's outside of the action safe zone. So if I push on P for position, and then I'm going to go and click this little stopwatch which appears beside a lot of elements in After Effects. And that's because that is there to lay down keyframes. A keyframe is a starting point, which means from this point in time. So if I click on this stopwatch, you can see it's put down a little blue diamond right there, which indicates that I've laid an anchor point down. So I'm going to now move my playhead over. I'm going to zoom in so I can see how many seconds. I'm going to move that to 5 seconds. So it's now going to take, if I move him across, you can see he's got a line there which shows that he's going to be keyframed. So I move that to 5 seconds. You hit spacebar to play your preview, and you can see him walking across there, and that took him 5 seconds to cruise across. So now we can see that he moves across the scene. If I want him to pause in the middle and then move, I can just delete this keyframe. I'm going to move him halfway. Oops. I'm going to move him halfway out, and I'm going to have him go there. So now, if I push spacebar, you can see Tomato Boy goes and stops right there. So now if I want Tomato Boy to stop and then go again, you can copy, Command C, the last one, Command V. So because that's the same keyframe as the last one I copied, nothing happens between these two keyframes, and that assures that you've given him a new starting point that is the same as the point where he ended on. And so if I now move my playhead again and move Tomato Boy over, you can see that when we push our spacebar, he's going to go halfway, stop, and then cruise off the stage. Now, if I want him to cartwheel on, I push R for rotation, R, and then I hit the stopwatch saying from this point in time. And then I'm going to move ahead to his halfway point, and I'm going to tell After Effects how many times I want him to cruise around. And so I'm going to choose 2 full rotations. There we go. That back to 0. There we are. So now, we're 1 and a bit. So now when he comes on, woo, he does a little cartwheel and stops and then continues and goes. Now the other thing that you can keyframe is the scale. So I'm going to have him come on, cartwheel, and then start to move towards camera, or to appear to move towards camera by adjusting his scale or hitting S. So I'm going to go have him start from here. I'm going to hit the stopwatch on scale, and by the time he's here, I want him to be this big. So watch what happens. We have him come in, pause, and now he's going to move off and walk towards camera. Now, there's another thing that you can keyframe. Well, there's lots of things that you can keyframe, but another basic one is transparency or opacity, which you hit T. And so now I'm going to have him come out here, and as he walks towards the camera from this point in time, I hit my stopwatch beside opacity, and I'm going to have him fully disappear by the time he gets to there. So I go from 100% opacity down to 0. So let's watch what happens. Comes out, pauses, and he disappears. And now if I want him to disappear more slowly, I can take both those keyframes and move them over so that he starts to disappear here instead. Here we are. And now it'll start to disappear. So that's how you use keyframes to keyframe animate. I'm going to go over a couple of really simple effects that you can do. One is a wiggle. This is a way of making something look like gelatin. In fact, it's called a gelatin wiggle. So if I just type wiggle into my effects, I see gelatin wiggle, and I can drop it on Tomato Boy. And so now when Tomato Boy walks on, or cartwheels on, he's got a little bit of a wiggle to him. And I can adjust the amount of the wiggle by going up here by wiggle amount and take it down to something like maybe 3 or 4. And now we'll see his wiggle will have chilled out a bit. Just gives him a little bit more life. You can also make it rain. I can put in rain. And there's one called CC Rainfall. So if I unlock my background layer, I drop CC Rainfall on it. Now you can see if I hit spacebar that it's raining in the garden where Tomato Boy is. Likewise, I can make light burst. So I can go type light burst in there. And you can look up different effects. If you think of one that might be in it, just give it a go. So I'm going to put my light burst on my garden. And then you can see that it's made it very dreamlike. And you can adjust, again, you can go in and say what the intensity is. So I can take down the intensity. You can say when it starts, what color the light burst is. So now I have him cruising through the garden with a light burst coming in. So I'm going to Command Z to go away from my light burst. And I'm just going to show you a quick particle system. So I'm going to go through and delete all these keyframes. So I'm going to go with the position for Tomato Boy. I'm going to delete all those keyframes. I'm going to delete all the scale keyframes. I'm going to delete the transparency keyframes, which I already have. And I think that's all our keyframes. Oh, and with rotation keyframes as well. So R, you can see the keyframes. Delete, and now Tomato Boy doesn't do anything except stand in the rain. So if I want to have some tomatoey goodness spray from the head of Tomato Boy, I can incorporate what's called the particle system. So a very easy one to use. If I just type particle into my effects, then I can choose create a new layer. So you go layer, new solid, and that will bring this up, and you can choose the color from down here, and I'm going to choose that color there. I'm going to say OK. Oh, there we go. I'm going to say OK, and that will give me a red solid. And now I'm going to dump particle playground onto that solid, and if I play it, you can see that there's a little trickle right now of red coming from the top of his head. You can go and adjust how much by playing with different things. So you can work with the particle direction. You can have it move that way or that way. I'm going to have it go straight up, and I'm going to make the velocity go a bit higher, and I'm going to get the particle radius to be a little bit bigger. There we go. And the barrel radius, I'm going to adjust that. And you can play with all these different settings until it looks like something that you like. Particle exploder, I'm going to play with the gravity. I want a little less force of gravity so that we get it spraying up. And then we get this going. Blah. So I can move that layer behind Tomato Boy so it looks more like it's coming from the top of his head. And you can also keyframe the opacity and the rotation just like normal. So if I don't want that to start for a couple of minutes, I can either keyframe the radius and the velocity, or when it starts, or birth and death it's known in particle world. I can adjust that by keyframing, or you can simply go opacity or transparency, T, from, I'm going to change that to 0. From this point in time, I don't want it to start until after 2 seconds, and then I'll make it go up to 100. So now we have that not there and then appearing suddenly. So that's particle systems, which is something that's usually pretty advanced, but I think you can handle it. So thanks for listening. I hope everything's clear. Have fun.